The unexpected return. The waitress, Sarah Jenkins, never expected to see him again. Not after all these years. Not the former student who had been something of a diamond in the rough, hidden potential beneath a veneer of teenage apathy. But when Mark Thompson strode into the diner that night, a confident aura radiating from him, she knew it wasn't just for a late-night burger. He was there with a purpose, a plan that, whether she liked it or not, was about to irrevocably alter the course of her life. Mark Thompson reclined in the plush leather seat of his chauffeured Maybach, his fingers drumming a silent tattoo against his knee. The garish glow of downtown Chicago refracted off the car's darkened windows, a kaleidoscope of urban energy. But Mark's gaze was fixed on a modest, family-run establishment across the street, Millie's Diner. It wasn't just any greasy spoon. It was where Sarah Jenkins, his former English teacher, worked. A knot tightened in his stomach, a mix of guilt and resentment churning within him. How could life be so utterly, inexplicably unfair? Sarah Jenkins, the woman who had seen through his defiant facade, who had challenged him to strive for something beyond mediocrity, was now serving coffee and wiping down tables. He vividly remembered the countless hours she had dedicated to him after school, patiently unraveling complex literary concepts, igniting in him a passion for words and ideas he never knew he possessed. She had been his advocate, his champion, fiercely defending him against teachers who had prematurely written him off as a troublemaker. Now, she was taking orders, dealing with demanding customers, and working long, grueling shifts. It was an outrage. A man of his influence, a titan of industry who could move markets with a single phone call, couldn't stand idly by while this injustice unfolded. Taking a deliberate breath, Mark pushed open the car door and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. His bespoke Italian leather shoes clicked softly against the pavement as he crossed the street, heading straight for Millie's Diner. The time had come to settle a long-overdue debt. The diner was bustling, a cacophony of clattering silverware, boisterous conversations, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sizzle of bacon on the grill. It was cozy, familiar, but a far cry from the exclusive restaurants and private clubs Mark typically frequented. His keen eyes scanned the room, quickly picking her out. Sarah moved with practiced grace, balancing a tray laden with plates and coffee mugs. The same calm focus, the same unwavering self-assurance she had exuded in the classroom were still there. But something was different. A weariness clung to her, subtle lines etched near her eyes, a muted exhaustion masked by a practiced, polite smile. They spoke volumes about the hardships she endured. She approached his table, her notepad poised, ready to take his order. Her eyes widened in disbelief, a tremor running through her. "Mark," her voice was barely audible, a soft whisper of surprise. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "It's been a long time, Miss Jenkins." She let out a soft, incredulous laugh, shaking her head. "I always knew you were destined for great things, Mark. You had that fire, that drive. You were the one who saw it, Miss Jenkins. You were the one who believed in me when no one else did." Mark replied, leaning back in his chair, a hint of genuine gratitude coloring his tone. For a while, they reminisced, catching up on the years that had slipped away. They talked about their lives, about the paths they had taken and the challenges they had faced. But then, Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more serious register. "Miss Jenkins, I want to help you." She frowned slightly, a hint of apprehension in her eyes. "Help me? How?" "I want to fund your dream," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I know you always wanted to open a school, a place for kids who didn't have the same advantages I did. Let me make that happen." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy with unspoken thoughts. Sarah's smile faltered, replaced by an expression of deep contemplation. Finally, she sighed, a hint of sadness in her voice. "Mark, I appreciate the offer, truly I do. But no." Mark stiffened, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "No." He hadn't anticipated this resistance. "Why not?" he asked, his confusion evident. Because I want to do it my way, she replied, her voice firm but gentle. If I succeed, it has to be because of my hard work, my dedication, not because of someone else's money. Mark's fingers tightened around his water glass, the cool condensation a stark contrast to the sudden heat rising within him. He had come here expecting gratitude, perhaps even relief. Instead, he was being rejected, dismissed. You don't have to struggle anymore, he said, his voice softer now, laced with concern. Why make things harder on yourself? Sarah gave him a small, wistful smile. Because hard work is all I have, Mark. If I take your help, I'll always feel like it wasn't truly mine. Like I didn't deserve it. Mark exhaled slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't the carefully orchestrated scenario he had envisioned. But if there was one thing he had learned from her all those years ago, it was that challenges were meant to be overcome, that obstacles were simply opportunities in disguise. I understand, he said finally, standing up, a new determination hardening his gaze. He walked out of the diner, the bell above the door chiming softly as he exited. But as he stepped out into the cold night air, a new idea began to take shape, a plan B that was far more intricate, far more audacious than his initial offer. If she wouldn't accept his help willingly, then he would simply have to help her without her knowledge, to orchestrate her success from behind the scenes. That night, Mark stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, gazing out at the dazzling cityscape. His thoughts refused to settle, a restless energy coursing through him. She wanted to succeed on her own terms? Fine. He would make sure she did, meticulously clearing the path before her, ensuring she reached her goals without ever suspecting his involvement. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Ethan Carter, he said, his voice crisp and authoritative. I need you to do something for me. By Millie's Diner, the restaurant where Sarah Jenkins works. But you absolutely cannot let her know that I'm involved in any way. Ethan paused, a hint of caution in his tone. Are you sure about this, Mark? If she finds out, she won't. Mark interrupted, his voice firm. Just make it happen. Within a week. The deal was done. Ethan Carter, a longtime friend and trusted business confidant, was now the official owner of Millie's Diner, at least on paper. He would maintain the illusion of independent ownership, allowing Sarah to believe she was working for someone else entirely. Now, it was time for the next phase of his plan. Mark didn't make things easy for Sarah. He didn't simply shower her with promotions or special treatment. Instead, he strategically orchestrated opportunities, subtle nudges that would encourage her to push herself, to discover her own potential. First, she was promoted to shift supervisor. She was genuinely shocked when Ethan told her the news. She knew she had been working hard, consistently going above and beyond her duties. But she never expected management to notice her efforts so quickly. This is a mistake, right? She asked Ethan, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ethan smirked, a knowing glint in his eyes. Not all, Sarah. You earned it. And she had. She had consistently demonstrated her leadership skills, her ability to handle difficult customers, and her unwavering commitment to the diner. Then, she became assistant manager. With each step up the ladder, she worked even harder, determined to prove herself, to justify the faith that Ethan seemed to have in her. She believed she was earning everything on her own, through sheer grit and determination. And in a way, she was. Mark was simply clearing the obstacles, providing her with the platform she needed to showcase her talents. But he wasn't done yet. He had a far more ambitious plan in mind, one that would test her abilities and force her to confront her own limitations. The diner was buzzing with anticipation. Employees gathered in the main dining area, their whispers filling the space with speculation. The announcement had been nothing short of earth-shattering. A competition. The winner would become the new owner of Millie's Diner. Sarah stood among them, her heart pounding in her chest. The prospect of owning the diner, of being her own boss, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had never once considered herself a business owner. All she had ever wanted was to work hard, earn her way up, and eventually save enough money to open a small community center for underprivileged kids. Yet here she was, staring at a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Ethan Carter, the man who had been running the diner ever since its sale, stood at the front of the room, smiling as he addressed the staff. "This will be a fair challenge," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "No favoritism, no exceptions. If you want to own this diner, you'll have to prove you deserve it." Sarah swallowed hard, her palms sweating. She had no idea what was coming next. Then, Ethan dropped the real bombshell. "You have 24 hours to prepare for the final test," he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Tomorrow, you'll face a mystery challenge. One designed to test your intelligence, your problem-solving skills, and your leadership potential." The tension in the air thickened, palpable and suffocating. A mystery challenge? What could it possibly be? Sarah glanced around the room. Some of the other employees were already whispering among themselves, exchanging nervous glances, wondering what the challenge might entail. But she wasn't scared. She was ready, or so she thought. That night, Sarah stayed late at the diner, mentally preparing herself for whatever lay ahead. She didn't know what the challenge would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She would give it her all. She would draw upon her years of experience, her unwavering work ethic, and her deep understanding of the diner's operations. But what she didn't know was that someone else had other plans. Someone who was determined to sabotage her efforts, to prevent her from winning the competition. Deep in the shadows of the diner's cluttered storage room, a hushed conversation was taking place. "You know she's going to win, right?" One of the senior employees, a disgruntled waiter named Frank, muttered, his voice laced with resentment. "She's practically running this place already. If we want a shot at owning the diner, we have to do something." His friend, Brenda, a longtime cook with a simmering grudge against Sarah, smirked. "What if we make sure she doesn't win?" Frank raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you thinking?" Brenda leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. She outlined her plan, a devious scheme designed to undermine Sarah's efforts and give them a competitive edge. And just like that, a plan was set in motion, a conspiracy brewing in the heart of Millie's diner. The next day, the diner was transformed into a battleground of intellect and skill. Ethan stood in the center of the dining area, a mysterious envelope clutched in his hands. "Inside this envelope are 5 business-related questions," he explained, his voice booming across the room. "The person who answers them best, demonstrating their ability to run this establishment effectively, will be declared the winner." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She could do this. She had spent years honing her knowledge of the restaurant industry, learning the ins and outs of every aspect of the diner's operations. She was ready to prove herself. Ethan pulled out the first question. It was complex, focusing on financial management and customer retention. Sarah furrowed her brow, quickly calculating the best approach, weighing the pros and cons of various strategies. Before she could speak, Frank jumped in, his voice loud and assertive. "I'll take this one." Sarah frowned slightly, a hint of annoyance flickering across her face. She had been ready to answer, confident in her ability to provide a thoughtful and comprehensive response. But she remained silent, allowing Frank to proceed. Frank launched into an overly complicated answer, one that sounded impressive on the surface but lacked real substance, a confusing jumble of buzzwords and industry jargon. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Interesting perspective, Frank. Sarah, your thoughts?" She didn't hesitate. "Actually, while Frank's approach has merit, I believe the most effective way to retain customers is by focusing on improving service quality and creating personalized dining experiences," she said, her voice clear and confident. "A diner isn't just about the food. It's about how customers feel when they dine here. If they feel valued, respected, and appreciated, they'll return. We need to create a welcoming atmosphere, train our staff to be attentive and responsive, and go the extra mile to make each customer feel special." A flicker of approval crossed Ethan's face, a subtle nod of acknowledgement. "Good point. One question down." The next few followed, each more difficult and intricate than the last. They covered everything from marketing strategies and employee management to menu planning and cost control. But Sarah held her ground, answering with clarity, precision, and unwavering confidence. She drew upon her years of experience, her keen understanding of the diner's operations, and her genuine passion for the restaurant industry. She was winning, steadily pulling ahead of the competition. Then came the final question, the one that would ultimately determine the outcome of the competition. Ethan pulled out the last card, his expression unreadable. The last question is a case study scenario. You're the owner of Millie's Diner. One night, a VIP guest arrives, someone powerful and influential. They're unhappy with their meal and demand that you fire the chef on the spot. If you don't comply, they threaten to leave a horrible review that could ruin the diner's reputation. What do you do? A hush fell over the room, the silence thick and heavy with tension. It was a trick question, a moral dilemma designed to test their judgment and their values. If you fire the chef, you're caving into pressure, sacrificing a loyal employee to appease a demanding customer. If you refuse, you risk destroying the diner's reputation, potentially losing business and jeopardizing the livelihoods of your staff. Sarah opened her mouth, ready to respond, to articulate her carefully considered approach. But before she could speak, Frank cut her off, his voice booming across the room. "You fire the chef," he said confidently, his eyes gleaming with a hint of triumph. "The reputation of the diner is the most important thing. A bad review from a VIP could destroy our business, damage our brand, and scare away potential customers." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his expression inscrutable. "Interesting choice, Frank. And you, Sarah?" Sarah paused, taking a deep breath, carefully weighing her words. Then, slowly, a determined smile spread across her face. "With all due respect to Frank's answer, I would handle it differently," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "A diner's reputation isn't just about pleasing one VIP customer. It's about the values it stands for, the principles it upholds. If I fire my chef over one mistake, I'd be sending a message to my staff that I don't value loyalty, that I'm willing to sacrifice their well-being to protect my own interests." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with each of her fellow employees. "Instead, I'd personally speak to the VIP guest, listen to their concerns, acknowledge their disappointment, and offer to correct the mistake, perhaps by inviting them back for a complimentary meal in the future. But I wouldn't fire my chef for one mistake. Because in the long run, building a culture of respect, trust, and loyalty matters more than one negative review." The room went silent, the air thick with anticipation. Ethan's lips twitched slightly, a hint of a smile playing around his mouth. "That's the best answer I've heard all day," he said finally, his voice ringing with sincerity. Frank's face paled, his confidence crumbling before his eyes. Brenda, standing beside him, shot him a venomous glare, her own hopes of winning dashed by his rash decision. Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand to Sarah. "There's no need for further discussion. Sarah, you're the winner. Millie's Diner is yours." For a moment, she couldn't breathe, her mind reeling from the shock of victory. Did she just win? Did she just become the owner of Millie's Diner? The unexpected confession. From the very start of her grand opening of the new school for those who have nothing, there was Logan. There were always other plans. The moment Sarah answered the final question, the entire room had fallen silent, hanging on Ethan's every word. Then, a wave of applause erupted, shattering the tension and filling the diner with joyful noise. Ethan stepped forward, smiling genuinely. "Sarah, you won fair and square," he said, extending his hand. "As of this moment, you're the new owner of Millie's Diner." Sarah felt her heart stop for a second, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Owner of Millie's Diner? Her workplace, her second home, the place she had struggled in for years, was now hers. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision as she shook Ethan's hand, a lump forming in her throat that prevented her from speaking. The staff gathered around her, cheering and congratulating her, their faces alight with joy and excitement. She saw the mix of emotions in their faces, genuine happiness for her success, surprise at her victory, and, from some, a hint of regret for ever doubting her abilities. Mark and Brenda, the two who had plotted against her, stood frozen, their faces crestfallen, defeated. They had tried to sabotage her, to undermine her efforts, yet she had triumphed on her own merit, her own hard work. And in that moment, Sarah felt something she had never expected: pride. Deep, unwavering pride in herself, in her accomplishments, in the journey she had undertaken to reach this point. She had done this on her own, without any handouts, without compromising her values. It was a silent victory, a testament to her resilience and her unwavering belief in herself. Meanwhile, in a luxurious penthouse high above the city, Mark stood by the window, watching the twinkling lights of the Chicago skyline. A glass of amber whiskey rested in his hand, but he hadn't taken a sip. His phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was a simple message from Ethan. She won. The diner is hers now. Mark exhaled deeply, a slow, satisfied smile forming on his lips. He had done it. His carefully orchestrated plan had worked perfectly. For months, he had meticulously crafted this journey for Sarah, not by handing her success on a silver platter, but by guiding her towards it, by providing her with the opportunities and the encouragement she needed to discover her own potential. She did it all on her own, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. She earned it. He set the glass down on a nearby table and looked out at the city, his gaze softening. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace, a sense of fulfillment washing over him that had nothing to do with business deals or financial success. Months passed, and Sarah dedicated herself entirely to her new role as owner of Millie's Diner. She managed the restaurant with the same passion and dedication she had always possessed, implementing new ideas, improving the menu, and creating a more welcoming atmosphere for her customers. She was living her dream, running a successful business, surrounded by a loyal and supportive staff. But deep in her heart, she knew her true calling lay elsewhere. She had always wanted to help children in need, to provide them with the opportunities and resources they deserved. And now, with her newfound resources and financial stability, she could finally make that dream a reality. She began working on a new project, a passion project that consumed her every waking thought. A school for homeless and underprivileged children, a place where kids who had nowhere to go could learn, eat, and grow without worrying about money, hunger, or safety. She poured her heart and soul into the project, scouting locations, hiring teachers, developing curriculum, and fundraising. She worked tirelessly, driven by a deep-seated desire to make a difference in the lives of vulnerable children. And so, after months of tireless work, her dream became a reality. She opened Hope Academy, a beacon of hope and opportunity for children who had been left behind by society. The school welcomed hundreds of children, providing them with education, nutritious meals, counseling, and a safe and nurturing environment. Sarah personally oversaw every detail, from hiring the best teachers and developing innovative programs to making sure each child received the individual attention and care they needed. She had finally made it, achieving her lifelong dream of helping those less fortunate than herself. As the grand opening day arrived, a momentous occasion filled with excitement and anticipation, one special guest was waiting in the crowd, a silent observer eager to witness Sarah's triumph. The Billionaire's confession. The grand opening of Hope Academy was a huge event, a celebration of Sarah's vision and her unwavering commitment to the children of Chicago. People from all over the city came to see the school, to learn about its mission, and to support its cause. Journalists, local officials, community leaders, and even some of Sarah's former teachers attended, their faces beaming with pride and admiration. But one man stood apart from the rest, a solitary figure dressed in an elegant black suit, his presence radiating an aura of power and influence. Mark Thompson entered the hall silently, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Sarah, who was standing on the stage, preparing to give her speech. The moment she spotted him, her breath caught in her throat, a wave of surprise and emotion washing over her. He was here. After all this time, after all the secrets and the carefully orchestrated schemes, he was finally here, witnessing her triumph. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and for a fleeting moment, nothing else existed, the world around them fading into a blurry background. The years melted away, and she saw him not as a billionaire, a titan of industry, but as the young boy she had once taught, the student she had believed in, the diamond in the rough she had helped to polish. As she stepped forward to the podium, her legs feeling slightly unsteady, she took a deep breath and addressed the crowd, her voice strong and confident, yet filled with emotion. "There was a time," she began, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the audience, "when I was just a waitress, struggling to survive, working long hours for minimum wage, barely making ends meet. But I always believed that hard work, dedication, and kindness could change lives, that even the smallest acts of compassion could make a difference in the world." She paused, her voice cracking slightly, her eyes welling up with tears. Then, she looked directly at Mark, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "But what I didn't realize was that sometimes kindness comes from unexpected places, from people who see something in you that you don't even see in yourself." A hush fell over the crowd, the silence broken only by the soft sniffles of emotion. Everyone knew who she was talking about, who she was referring to with such heartfelt gratitude. Without hesitation, Mark stepped forward, his face etched with a mix of emotions. Sarah handed him the microphone, her fingers brushing against his as she relinquished control. The crowd fell silent, their eyes glued to Mark, their anticipation palpable. Everyone knew who he was, the mysterious billionaire, the reclusive businessman, the man who had built a global empire from nothing. He was a legend, an enigma, a figure shrouded in secrecy and speculation. Mark took the microphone and scanned the room, his expression unreadable, his eyes lingering on Sarah for a moment before sweeping across the faces in the audience. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice deep and resonant, filling the hall with its power and authority. "There was a time," he said, mirroring her words, his voice tinged with emotion, "when I was just a young boy, sitting in a classroom, struggling to believe in myself, doubting my abilities, feeling lost and alone in the world. I was a troublemaker, a disruptor, a kid who everyone had written off as a lost cause." His eyes locked onto Sarah's, his gaze unwavering. "But I had a teacher, one who never gave up on me, one who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She saw something in me that no one else saw, potential, intelligence, a spark of hope that could be ignited with the right encouragement." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. She knew he was talking about her, about the impact she had had on his life, about the difference she had made in his journey. Mark took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly. "For years, I wanted to repay that kindness, to show my gratitude for the teacher who had changed my life, who had set me on the path to success. But I knew that simply giving back wasn't enough. I had to make sure she achieved her dreams on her own terms, that she experienced the satisfaction of earning her own success, of making a difference in the world." He looked around the room, his gaze encompassing the children, the teachers, the volunteers, and the supporters. "And that's why we're all standing here today, celebrating the grand opening of Hope Academy, a testament to Sarah's vision, her compassion, and her unwavering commitment to the children of Chicago." The entire crowd was silent, hanging on his every word, moved by his sincerity, his vulnerability, and his heartfelt tribute to the woman who had changed his life. Then, someone began clapping, a slow, deliberate rhythm that broke the spell and ignited a spark of appreciation in the room. Slowly, more and more people joined in, their applause growing louder and louder, building into a thunderous ovation that shook the hall and reverberated through the hearts of everyone present. Sarah wiped away a tear, her face radiant with happiness and gratitude. For the first time, she saw Mark not as a billionaire, not as a businessman, but as the boy she had once taught, the student she had believed in, the friend she had always cherished. And in that moment, she knew he hadn't just changed her life. He had changed the lives of hundreds of children, providing them with a future, with hope, with the opportunity to achieve their own dreams. She stepped forward, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude, and without hesitation, wrapped her arms around him, embracing him in a warm and heartfelt hug. The audience gasped, their eyes widening in surprise, their faces breaking into smiles. Then, they cheered even louder, their applause reaching a crescendo of appreciation and admiration. Later that night, as the event came to an end and the guests began to depart, Mark stood near the school's entrance, watching the children laugh and play in the yard, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. Sarah approached him, a warm smile on her face, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "So," she said softly, her voice tinged with amusement, "all this time, you're helping me, orchestrating my success from behind the scenes." Mark shrugged, a hint of a smile playing around his mouth. "I just gave you a push," he said, his voice low and tender. "You did the rest. You always had it in you." She smiled, shaking her head in disbelief. "Thank you, Mark," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me, for giving me this opportunity, for changing my life." He looked at her, his expression softening, his eyes filled with admiration. "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, Sarah. You're the one who changed my life." As he turned to leave, he glanced back one last time at the school, at the children playing, at the woman who had once been his teacher but had now become something greater, a role model, a mentor, an inspiration. And for the first time in years, Mark felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. True happiness, a sense of purpose, a deep and abiding satisfaction in the knowledge that he had made a difference in the world. As he walked away into the night, disappearing into the shadows, Sarah whispered softly, her voice carried away by the wind, "You were always my best student, Mark. You always had the potential to change the world." And deep in his heart, Mark knew she was right. He had finally repaid the kindness that had once saved him, the kindness that had set him on the path to success, the kindness that had ultimately led him to this moment, to this place, to this feeling of profound and enduring happiness.